If you're curious about learning the fly stitch and how you can use it in your work, then you're in the right place. The fly stitch is a very useful stitch that I don't think gets enough credit. I like to use the fly stitch fairly regularly in my stitching. I'm Julie and I make fabric landscapes using quilting and embroidery techniques. My landscapes are layers of fabric, all different types of fabrics that are stitched together by hand, and then at the end I like to add embroidered details. Sometimes I'll add flowers or trees or bushes and grasses, depending on what kind of scene I'm making. I like to add in all the details that are easier added by embroidery rather than adding more pieces of fabric. So the fly stitch is an interesting stitch that I do use both in greenery, and I also use it in some of the flowers that I make. So I'm going to show you in this demonstration how I make the fly stitch and also some of the ways that you might want to use it. Let's get started. Now for the fly stitch, I have threaded my needle with 2 strands of embroidery floss. Don't mind this little bush here on the side. We created that in the feather stitch video. With a fly stitch has some similarities actually to the feather stitch, but the thing that it makes it different is that each individual stitch can stand alone, whereas on a feather stitch, you've got stitches that sort of run together. So with a fly stitch, I'll show you how I work a fly stitch. I'm going to come up out of the fabric. I'm going to go over and then bring my needle up, making a shape of a V. So it's like a little triangle, which is similar to what we did with the feather stitch. So making it come up, and I'm pulling down with my thread. You never want to pull up because then your thread's going to go flat, and then when you go to pull down, you don't get that same sharpness to your V. So I'm just going to loosen that up and show you again. So if you loosen it up and you pull down with your thread, you get that nice crisp looking V, okay? And then when you have this thread coming out to hold that V, what makes it a fly stitch is that then you give it a little tail and take a stitch through to the back of your fabric. And that is a fly stitch. It looks like a Y. So that's a little fly stitch. Now I use fly stitches. I'm going to do another one right beside. I use fly stitches quite often in my landscapes because they look like a little plant, don't they? They're just like the perfect little plant. So you can make your little Ys much narrower if you want like a tiny plant. I'm going to give it a little stem. They're always giving it a stem after. That's what makes it the fly stitch. And you can make them really wide. So they make wonderful little plants up in the foreground of whatever you're stitching. And especially if you're new to embroidery and you don't feel like buying a pattern, you can easily just freestyle a few of these little Y stitches. I'm calling them Y stitches because they look like a Y, but you know, fly stitches. And you can make any number of different shapes to create little plants. So basically, you're just going to make a whole bunch of them, and that's how you can use them in your work. Now I'm going to show you another way that I like to use fly stitches. So they can be used individually like this. I'm going to tie this off. And I should explain, I don't use an embroidery hoop because some people who are watching this who are new to embroidery are wondering, like, don't I need a hoop? You don't need a hoop to do embroidery. Now, if you're doing traditional embroidery, like with any kind of cross stitch or that kind of thing, of course you would want to have a hoop. But because I work on landscapes, I prefer to have everything loose. It's just the way I like to stitch. So this is a piece of cotton fabric that I've painted on, and I have fused a piece of woven, it's a medium weight woven pellon interfacing to the back of this. And that's what's keeping it fairly stiff. So I'm not too concerned with pulling my stitches too tight because the interfacing does keep it quite flat. Now, that being said, don't over pull. If you see your fabric getting all sort of puckered up, it's because you're pulling too tight. Okay, so I'm going to show you one other way that you can do a fly stitch in just a whole bunch of fly stitches combined to make kind of an interesting little plant. So I'm going to, this is a Frixion pen, which will erase afterwards if I need it to with an iron. But I'm just going to draw a line. So imagine that I want to create sort of some type of pine tree. Actually, you know what? What the heck? I'm going to go way up into the sky. It's a pine tree, so it's got to be tall. I'm using my dark green thread. Hopefully I have enough thread here. You know what? I'm going to switch to a new thread because I don't have a very long one. Okay, I'm going to use a dark green. This is a 6-strand embroidery floss, and I am splitting out 2 strands. And the way you split out 2 strands from the 6 is you sort of pull them apart, and then don't just sort of pull them like this. They're all going to get all tangled up like that. And you don't want that. What you want to do is you want to separate out the 2 strands you want, like this, and then hold this loosely with your thumb and pull the 2 strands through. If they kind of get snagged up, just give it a little bit of massage down there, and then you'll be able to keep pulling it. It just kind of gets tangled on itself a little, but they don't get completely tangled up. You just pull it through. And then you can save those 4 strands for later. So I've got my 2 strands. Let me just see if I can thread this. Let me get that in. Oh, it's a pretty tiny needle. Oh, I got it. Wow. I'm not that particular about the size of needle that I use. I just need it to be small enough that it doesn't leave big holes behind, and big enough that it gets my thread through without damaging my thread. So, okay, so if I was doing a pine tree, this would be a cool way to use a fly stitch. So I'm just rolling my fabric a little bit so I don't get it all creased up when I'm doing this. So I'm going to come up at the top or somewhere near the top. I'm going to come to the side of it because I'm going to do a fly stitch, obviously. And then I'm going to make the first at the top of my pine tree like a pretty tight fly stitch. And I'm going to give it a stem. So cute. So that's the top of my tree. Now, actually, because it is a pine tree, I'm going to add in 1 straight stitch up at the top because it needs to have a top to the tree. Okay, and then what you can do is, let's go back and do another fly stitch, and I'm just going to come up a little bit higher than where that last fly stitch ended, and I'm going to come across, put my needle back in, and make the end of my V, so make my needle come back up right at the end of that first fly stitch's stem. So when I come up, do you see how my thumb is kind of controlling this thread just to make sure that this thread, as I'm pulling it, is over top of that other one to create that loop. And now I'm going to give that one a little stem. And so that's just really a couple of fly stitches stacked. Now what I'm going to do is I'll come up again in a very similar sort of spacing. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Similar spacing to what I did in the first one. So those are pretty close together. So I'm going to come up very, very close because we're still sort of at the top of the tree. And I'm going to put my needle in directly across, space it. I'm just eyeballing it, spacing it about the same, and make my needle come up right at the end of that stitch above it. And there's a third one. And you see how that's starting to look like a little pine tree. Now I have to make that one have a stem, so I'm going to give it a stem. So that's my 3 fly stitches stacked, and we can keep going with this. I'm going to do another one. Think of all the ways you can use this. Oh my gosh, even if you were just stitching a little Christmas ornament, because it's starting to look like a little Christmas tree. Okay, stitching across and then pulling down, and then you have to take a bit of a stem, take a single stitch there. That's my next fly stitch. So I'm literally just stacking fly stitches, one on top of the other. And now I'm going to start getting a little wider. I'm going to keep coming out a little wider. I'm sort of ballparking it just to try to get them the same distance apart. Give that one its stem. And don't worry if it's looking really spindly, because what you can do afterwards is you can always go back over it with another color and bulk it up a little if you want. Do the exact same thing over again. How great is that? And so that's how you would make a pine tree. Just keep on trucking all the way down. I can see I'm going to run out of thread here really quick, but this might be my last Y stitch or fly stitch that I can do on this tree. I don't think I'm going to get another one after this. So I'm going to go like that, hold down, and I'm going to take it to the back. And I'll have to get another thread to finish that all the way to the bottom. So that's the fly stitch. Not a difficult stitch, but a really fun one to use if you are somebody who is starting to do embroidery and you like to do any kind of natural flowers or trees, that kind of thing. Now, I just wanted to show you, this is a landscape that I am working on right now. And I just wanted to show you, hang on, I'm just going to take that off here. Right down here in these little flowers here. Those are all just little fly stitches. Can you see that? Hopefully you can see them. So it's just little fly stitches. Now I've added in some French knots to make them look like flowers. But just an example of how you might want to add a fly stitch into some of your work. And I'm just going to show you one other one. So these ones, I did some fly stitches here in the front. That's done in a pearl cotton. Is that in focus? I can't tell. Hang on to see. Here we go. These ones are little ones that are done with embroidery floss and then done with some pearl cotton as well. So little fly stitches. So I think you'll find once you try them, it's a very simple stitch, but a really fun one if you want to do a little bit of freehand embroidery. Well, I hope you enjoyed that stitch. It's a fun one, and it's worth your while practicing it a few times and seeing where you might want to use it in some of your own work. If you haven't already seen the longer video that I've created with my top 10 stitches for beginners, you are going to want to watch that and see all of the different stitches that, especially if you're new to embroidery, are a great place to start. If you'd like to see more of my artwork, you're welcome to go to my website at juliegarcia.com, and I will leave all of the links to those spots in the comments below this video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.